The weekend afternoon sun filtered through the tall oak trees surrounding Riverside Park's outdoor martial arts training area. Children's laughter echoed from the nearby playground, while families enjoyed picnics on the grass. The concrete platform designated for martial arts practice was busy with a group of young adults working through their taekwondo routines. Rachel Lynn sat on a nearby bench, watching her 7-year-old son Marcus play on the jungle gym. At 30, she had the quiet presence of someone who preferred observing to being observed. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore simple athletic clothes that looked more suited for a casual walk than any serious physical activity. Her wire-rimmed glasses and gentle demeanor gave her the appearance of a typical suburban mother enjoying a peaceful weekend with her child. The martial arts group was led by Kyle Morrison, a confident 25-year-old who wore his black belt with obvious pride. He moved through forms with impressive technique and clear athletic ability. His fellow practitioners looked up to him for guidance, and he seemed to enjoy the role of mentor and leader. "Good work, everyone," Kyle called out as the group finished their practice session. "Remember to focus on your footwork during the week. I'll see you all back here next Saturday." As the group began to disperse, Kyle noticed Rachel and Marcus watching from the sidelines. He had seen them there for the past few weeks, and his naturally friendly personality prompted him to approach them. "Hey there," Kyle said with a welcoming smile. "I've seen you guys here a few times. Are you interested in martial arts?" Rachel looked up from her book and smiled politely. "Just enjoying the fresh air while Marcus plays. You all look very skilled." "Thanks," Kyle replied, his confidence evident. "I've been training for 12 years, got my black belt 3 years ago. It's a great way to stay in shape and learn self-defense." Marcus ran over from the playground, slightly out of breath from climbing and swinging. "Mom, can we get ice cream now?" "In a few minutes, sweetheart," Rachel said, then turned back to Kyle. "Thank you for letting us watch your practice sessions. Marcus finds it very interesting." Kyle studied Rachel for a moment, taking in her calm demeanor and athletic build that was somewhat hidden by her loose-fitting clothes. Something about the way she carried herself caught his attention, though he couldn't quite identify what it was. "You know what?" Kyle said with a playful grin that his friends recognized as his show-off expression. "Why don't you step onto the mat for a minute, just for fun? I promise I'll go easy on you." The remaining members of Kyle's group stopped their conversations and turned to watch this unexpected development. A few of them chuckled, expecting to see an awkward demonstration between their skilled instructor and an obviously inexperienced suburban mom. Rachel looked at Kyle for a moment, then at the curious faces of his students, and finally at Marcus, who had stopped fidgeting and was watching the interaction with interest. "If I accidentally hurt you," Rachel said with a gentle smile, "I apologize in advance." The group erupted in good-natured laughter. Kyle grinned wider, interpreting her comment as nervous humor from someone who was about to be completely outmatched. "I'll take my chances," Kyle said confidently, gesturing toward the practice mat. Rachel stood up slowly, removing her glasses and setting them carefully on the bench next to her book. She stepped onto the mat with the unhurried movements of someone who was completely comfortable in the space. Kyle took his position across from her, adopting a classic taekwondo fighting stance that showcased years of training and muscle memory. He was still smiling, clearly expecting this to be a brief and entertaining demonstration for his students. Rachel stood quietly for a moment, simply observing Kyle's posture and stance. Then she made a subtle adjustment to her own position, just a slight shift in her weight distribution and the angle of her shoulders. The change was so minimal that most observers barely noticed it, but Kyle felt something shift in the atmosphere around them. The confident smile on his face began to fade, as some instinct told him that this interaction was about to become something very different from what he had expected. Rachel moved her right shoulder in what appeared to be a simple warm-up gesture, but the movement had a quality that made Kyle unconsciously take a half step backward. His body recognized something that his mind hadn't yet processed. When Rachel executed her second movement, a fluid, controlled gesture that combined balance, timing, and precision in a way that spoke of decades of dedicated training, the entire group fell silent. Everyone watching suddenly understood that they were about to witness something extraordinary. You happened to catch this story while you were where? At the park, a cafe, or just taking a moment to rest? Share in the comments. Who knows, the place you're standing might be where the next unexpected moment begins. Rachel Lynn's journey to that park bench had been shaped by choices that prioritize family over fame, responsibility over recognition. 10 years earlier, she had been one of the most promising young martial artists in the country, with a future that seemed destined for international competition and professional success. At 19, Rachel had won the state championship in Aikido, defeating opponents who had been training since childhood at elite academies. Her technique was flawless, but what set her apart was her mental approach to martial arts. While other competitors focused on aggression and dominance, Rachel understood martial arts as a discipline of balance, timing, and using an opponent's energy against them. Her sensei, Master Tanaka, had called her a once-in-a-generation talent and had been preparing her for national and international competitions. Sponsors were interested. Olympic training camps had extended invitations. Rachel's future seemed to be a clear path toward becoming one of America's top martial artists. But life had other plans. During Rachel's sophomore year in college, her mother was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's disease. The diagnosis came just as Rachel was being offered a place on the national team that would require extensive travel and training commitments. The decision Rachel faced wasn't between success and failure. It was between two different definitions of what success meant. She could pursue her martial arts career while her mother's condition deteriorated, or she could step away from competition to provide the care and support her family needed. Rachel chose family. She withdrew from competitive martial arts and transferred to a local college where she could live at home. She studied accounting because it offered stable employment with predictable hours that would allow her to care for her mother. Her training shifted from preparing for competitions to maintaining personal discipline and inner peace during increasingly difficult circumstances. For 3 years, Rachel managed her mother's care while completing her degree. She continued practicing Aikido in the early morning hours before her mother woke up, using the discipline and meditation aspects of martial arts to maintain her emotional and physical strength. Her mother passed away during Rachel's senior year of college. By then, the window for returning to competitive martial arts had largely closed. Rachel was 22, which was late to resume serious training for international competition. More importantly, she had discovered that her identity and satisfaction came from sources beyond athletic achievement. After graduation, Rachel found work as a part-time accountant with a small firm that valued her reliability and attention to detail over ambitious career goals. The flexible schedule allowed her to volunteer teaching martial arts basics to children in her community's Asian immigrant population. When Marcus was born 2 years later, Rachel's priorities shifted again. Marcus's father, whom she had dated seriously during college, decided he wasn't ready for parenthood and moved across the country for a job opportunity. Rachel found herself facing single motherhood with the same quiet determination she had brought to every other challenge in her life. She reduced her work schedule to part-time and focused on creating a stable, nurturing environment for Marcus. Their small apartment was modest but comfortable. Rachel's approach to parenting reflected the same principles she had learned through martial arts: consistency, patience, and the understanding that true strength often looked like gentleness. Rachel continued her personal martial arts practice in their apartment's small backyard each morning before Marcus woke up. These sessions weren't about maintaining competitive skills. They were about preserving the mental discipline and physical awareness that had become essential parts of who she was. She also continued teaching basic self-defense and martial arts principles to children in her neighborhood, particularly kids from families who couldn't afford formal martial arts schools. Rachel's classes emphasized respect, self-control, and conflict resolution as much as physical techniques. Her students' parents appreciated Rachel's approach because she taught their children to avoid fights rather than win them. She emphasized that martial arts skills were tools of last resort, to be used only when all other options had been exhausted. Rachel never spoke about her competitive background with the parents or children in her informal classes. To them, she was simply a kind neighbor who happened to know some useful self-defense techniques and was willing to share them freely. The weekend visits to Riverside Park had become part of Rachel and Marcus's routine. Marcus loved the playground, and Rachel enjoyed the opportunity to sit outside and read while he played. She had noticed the Taekwondo group's regular practice sessions, but had never felt any urge to join or interrupt their training. Watching Kyle and his students work through their forms reminded Rachel of her own training days, but without nostalgia or regret. She had made peace with the choices that had led her away from competitive martial arts. Her life had taken a different direction, but it was a direction she had chosen consciously and purposefully. When Kyle approached her with his playful challenge, Rachel's first instinct was to politely decline. She wasn't looking for opportunities to demonstrate her abilities or to revisit her competitive past. But something in the young man's confident assumption that she would be easily overwhelmed sparked a gentle desire to provide a learning experience. Rachel understood that Kyle's challenge came from inexperience rather than malice. He was young, skilled, and proud of his achievements. A brief demonstration of what real martial arts mastery looked like might teach him something valuable about humility and respect. More importantly, Marcus was watching. Rachel wanted her son to understand that quiet confidence was more powerful than loud boasting, and that true strength often surprised people precisely because it didn't announce itself. What happened on the mat that afternoon would be replayed in Kyle's mind for weeks afterward. Rachel's demonstration had lasted less than 3 minutes, but it had completely changed his understanding of what martial arts mastery actually looked like. Kyle had expected to engage in a friendly sparring session where he would gently outclass an inexperienced opponent. Instead, he found himself facing someone whose movements seemed to operate according to different laws of physics. Every technique he attempted was redirected with minimal effort. Every attack he launched somehow became an opportunity for Rachel to demonstrate perfect balance and control. Most remarkably, Rachel never struck him. She simply moved in ways that made his own techniques impossible to execute. When he tried to advance, she created space. When he attempted to retreat, she controlled the distance. It was like trying to fight against water. Everything he did was absorbed and redirected without any sense that he was engaging with solid resistance. The brief demonstration ended when Rachel gently guided Kyle into a position where he was completely off balance but perfectly safe. She held him there for just a moment, long enough for him to understand that she could have ended the encounter in any number of ways, then helped him regain his footing. "Thank you for the practice," Rachel said simply, then walked back to the bench to collect her glasses and book. Kyle stood on the mat for several moments after Rachel had returned to her bench, trying to process what had just happened. His students gathered around him with expressions ranging from amazement to confusion. "Dude, what was that?" asked one of his junior students. "She moved like you were moving in slow motion." Kyle didn't have an answer. In 12 years of training, he had never encountered anything like Rachel's effortless technique. Her movements had been precise without being rigid, powerful without being forceful, and completely effective without being aggressive. That evening, Kyle couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. He began researching martial arts videos online, looking for examples of the type of technique Rachel had demonstrated. His search led him to videos of Aikido masters and other internal martial arts that emphasize redirection and balance over force and speed. But even among masters of these disciplines, Kyle couldn't find anyone who moved with quite the same quality Rachel had displayed. There was something in her approach that spoke of years of dedicated practice, combined with natural talent and deep understanding. Kyle returned to the park the following Saturday, hoping to see Rachel again. When she appeared with Marcus at their usual time, Kyle approached her with a completely different demeanor than he had shown the week before. "I wanted to apologize," Kyle said, his usual confidence replaced by genuine humility. "I realize I was disrespectful last week. I made assumptions about your experience level that were completely wrong." Rachel looked up from her book with a surprised expression. "Kyle, you don't need to apologize. You were just being friendly." "I was being arrogant," Kyle corrected. "And I'd like to ask you something, if that's okay. Would you be willing to teach me? I mean, would you consider working with our group as an instructor or mentor?" Rachel considered the request carefully. "Kyle, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not really interested in formal teaching. I work with a few neighborhood kids, but that's about as much structure as I want in my practice." "Could I at least ask about your background?" Kyle pressed gently. "I've been training for years, and I've never seen anything like what you demonstrated. Where did you study?" Rachel was quiet for a moment, watching Marcus navigate the playground equipment with the fearless energy of a 7-year-old. "I trained in Aikido for several years when I was younger, but that was a long time ago. Kyle sensed that there was much more to the story, but he respected Rachel's obvious preference for privacy. Over the following weeks, he began conducting his own research into competitive Aikido records from the past decade. What he discovered amazed him. Rachel Lynn had been a state champion at 19 and had been ranked among the top prospects for national competition. Articles from martial arts magazines described her as a prodigy and a future Olympic hopeful. Then suddenly her name disappeared from competition records. Kyle never confronted Rachel with this information. Instead, he began observing her more carefully during their weekly encounters at the park. He noticed details that his initial arrogance had caused him to miss. The way she moved with perfect posture even while sitting casually on a bench, the calm awareness with which she monitored her surroundings, the gentle but firm way she guided Marcus through conflicts with other children on the playground. Most importantly, Kyle began to understand that Rachel's reluctance to teach wasn't about false modesty or shyness. She had genuinely moved beyond the competitive aspects of martial arts into something more personal and philosophical. When Kyle finally worked up the courage to ask Rachel for guidance again, he framed his request differently. "I don't want you to teach me techniques," he said. "I want to understand how you think about martial arts. What it means to you beyond just the physical skills." Rachel smiled at the question. "Martial arts taught me that real strength usually looks like gentleness, that the most powerful response to aggression is often not to respond with more aggression, that the goal isn't to prove you're strong, it's to live in a way that strength becomes unnecessary." Kyle realized that Rachel was offering him something more valuable than any formal lesson, a completely different way of understanding what mastery actually meant. 3 weeks after their encounter at the park, Kyle's training partner posted a video of Rachel's demonstration on social media. The footage, captured discreetly on a phone, showed just enough of Rachel's technique to intrigue viewers without revealing her identity clearly. The video went viral within the martial arts community almost immediately. Comments poured in from practitioners around the world, analyzing Rachel's movements and speculating about her training background. Several martial arts websites featured the video with headlines like, "Mystery Woman Demonstrates Perfect Aikido Technique," and "Unknown Master Shows Incredible Skill." The attention eventually reached Rebecca Chen, a documentary filmmaker who specialized in profiles of exceptional athletes, particularly women in sports who had overcome significant challenges. Rebecca had been developing a series about female martial artists who had made unconventional choices in their careers. Through careful research and local inquiries, Rebecca managed to identify Rachel and track down her contact information. She called Rachel on a Tuesday evening, just as Rachel was helping Marcus with his homework. "Ms. Lin, my name is Rebecca Chen. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I'd like to talk to you about participating in a project I'm developing about women in martial arts." Rachel was surprised by the call. She had no idea that any video of her existed, much less that it had gained widespread attention. "I think there might be some mistake," Rachel said politely. "I'm not involved in competitive martial arts anymore." "That's actually exactly why I'd like to talk with you," Rebecca replied. "My project focuses on women who have taken unconventional paths in their athletic careers. Your story, from competitive success to stepping away for family reasons to continuing practice on your own terms, represents exactly the kind of narrative that needs to be told." Rebecca went on to explain that she had researched Rachel's competitive background and understood the circumstances that had led her to leave competition. The documentary would explore themes of sacrifice, choice, and alternative definitions of success in athletics. The project would involve interviews about your background, your decision to leave competition, and your current approach to martial arts. We'd also film some demonstration sessions to show your current skill level. Rebecca paused, then mentioned the compensation being offered. The amount was substantial, enough to cover Marcus's educational expenses for years or allow Rachel to work fewer hours and spend more time with her son. Rachel listened to the entire proposal without interrupting, but her answer came without hesitation. "I appreciate your interest in my story, Ms. Chen, but I'm going to have to decline." "May I ask why?" Rebecca pressed gently. "This could be an opportunity to inspire other women who are facing similar choices between career and family." Rachel considered how to explain her decision. "I stepped away from the spotlight once for very specific reasons. Those reasons haven't changed. I'm not interested in returning to any form of public attention or recognition. But your story could help other people understand that there are different ways to find fulfillment in martial arts beyond competition and recognition. I hope people can find their own ways to fulfillment without needing my story as an example, Rachel replied. Besides, the most important lessons I've learned aren't the kind that translate well to documentary films. Rebecca tried a different approach. What if we focus less on your competitive background and more on your current work with children in your community? We could highlight the importance of accessible martial arts education. The children I work with and their families value their privacy as much as I value mine, Rachel said firmly. I wouldn't want to expose them to outside attention without their consent, and I doubt they would want that exposure. Rebecca made one final attempt. Ms. Lin, you have skills and insights that could benefit martial artists around the world. Don't you feel any responsibility to share what you've learned? Rachel was quiet for a long moment before responding. I share what I've learned every day with the people in my immediate community. I teach children in my neighborhood. I model for my son what it looks like to live with discipline and purpose. I demonstrate to other parents that strength comes in many forms. She continued, I don't need a camera or a large audience to share what I know. The people who need what I have to offer find their way to me naturally. After ending the call, Rachel reflected on the conversation. She understood Rebecca's perspective and didn't fault the filmmaker for the approach. But Rachel had learned something important during her years away from competition. The desire to be seen and recognized could become a distraction from the actual practice and application of skills. Her current life allowed her to use her martial arts training in ways that felt meaningful and sustainable. She taught children not because she wanted credit for being a good teacher, but because the children in her community needed guidance. She practiced not because she wanted to maintain her skills for demonstration, but because the discipline and mental clarity benefited her daily life as a mother and community member. That evening, as Rachel helped Marcus prepare for bed, he asked about the phone call he had overheard. Someone wanted to make a movie about your fighting, didn't they, Mom? Something like that, Rachel replied. Are you going to be famous? Rachel smiled and tucked the blanket around her son. I'd rather be helpful than famous. Fame goes away, but the good things you do for people last much longer. Marcus considered this seriously. So you're going to keep teaching me and the other kids instead? Exactly, Rachel said. That feels like the most important job I could have. 2 months after declining the documentary opportunity, Rachel found herself at the center of a community event that she had never intended to join. Kyle had organized a youth martial arts tournament to raise funds for the local community center's after-school programs. What had started as a small neighborhood gathering had grown into a regional event attracting participants from across the state. Kyle had been transformed by his encounter with Rachel and their subsequent conversations about the philosophy behind martial arts practice. His teaching style had evolved from emphasizing winning and dominance to focusing on personal growth, respect, and community service. I used to think the black belt was the destination, Kyle told the audience of parents, children, and martial arts enthusiasts who had gathered for the tournament. But I met someone who taught me that the belt is just the beginning of the real journey. Rachel sat in the back row of the community center's main hall, with Marcus beside her and several of the neighborhood children she taught scattered among nearby seats. She had come to support the young people who were participating, not because she wanted any personal recognition. Kyle continued his opening remarks. Martial arts isn't about proving you're stronger than other people. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. The tournament itself was unlike any martial arts competition Rachel had ever attended. Instead of emphasizing aggressive techniques and decisive victories, Kyle had structured the event to showcase personal improvement, technical skill, and sportsmanship. Participants were evaluated not just on their physical abilities, but on how they helped and encouraged their fellow competitors. Between events, Kyle invited several local martial arts instructors to demonstrate different styles and approaches. Each demonstration was followed by a brief discussion about the philosophical foundations of the art being shown. Now, Kyle said, as the formal demonstrations concluded, I'd like to ask someone special to share a few thoughts with our young participants. Rachel felt a moment of panic as Kyle's eyes found her in the audience. She had specifically asked him not to single her out or mention her background during the event. But Kyle didn't call her name or ask her to come forward. Instead, he spoke directly to the children in the audience. How many of you have learned martial arts from someone in your own neighborhood? Someone who teaches you not because it's their job, but because they care about helping you grow? Several hands went up, including Marcus's and those of the other children Rachel worked with. Those teachers, Kyle continued, are often the most important martial arts instructors you'll ever have. They're not famous. They don't have fancy schools or expensive equipment, but they understand something that all the tournaments and trophies in the world can't teach. Kyle paused, looking directly at Rachel. They understand that the highest level of martial arts is using what you know to make your community stronger. The applause that followed was warm but not overwhelming. Rachel felt seen and appreciated without being exposed or exploited. Kyle had found a way to honor her contributions without violating her privacy or forcing her into unwanted spotlight. After the tournament's official conclusion, several parents approached Rachel to thank her for her work with their children. They shared stories about increased confidence, better conflict resolution skills, and improved focus that their kids had gained from Rachel's informal instruction. "My daughter used to get picked on at school," one mother told Rachel. "The techniques you taught her helped, but more importantly, the way you taught her to think about conflict made all the difference. She doesn't get into fights anymore because she doesn't need to prove anything." Another parent added, "My son talks about you all the time. He says you taught him that being strong means protecting people, not hurting them." Kyle approached Rachel as the crowd began to disperse. "I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable with what I said up there." "You handled it perfectly," Rachel replied. "You found a way to make an important point without making it about any individual person." "I've been thinking about what you told me regarding strength looking like gentleness," Kyle said. "Today I watched kids who could easily dominate their opponents instead choosing to help them improve their technique. That's what you were talking about, isn't it?" Rachel nodded. "When you're confident in your abilities, you don't need to use them to prove anything. You can use them to lift other people up instead." Marcus tugged on Rachel's sleeve. "Mom, can we go get ice cream now?" "You promised after the tournament." "Of course, sweetheart," Rachel said, then turned back to Kyle. "Thank you for creating something that brings out the best in people instead of just showcasing who's the strongest." As they prepared to leave, Kyle pulled a small wrapped package from his gym bag. "I got you something. Just a small thank you for everything you've taught me." Rachel opened the package to find a simple white belt, the kind given to beginning martial arts students. She looked at Kyle with confusion. "I know you already have black belts and probably higher rankings," Kyle explained, "but I thought this might remind you that with the kids you teach, you're giving them their first experience with martial arts. You're not just teaching them techniques, you're teaching them what martial arts means." Rachel held the white belt, understanding the symbolism. In many ways, her work with neighborhood children was more important than any advanced rank she had earned in competition. She was shaping their first understanding of what strength and discipline could look like. "Thank you," Rachel said simply. "This means more than any trophy ever could." As they walked toward the parking lot, Marcus looked up at his mother. "Mom, Kyle said you're really good at fighting. Are you famous?" Rachel adjusted the white belt in her hands and smiled at her son. "No, Marcus, but I'm useful, and that's much better than being famous." "Why is it better?" "Because when you're useful, you help people. When you're famous, people help you. I'd rather spend my life helping others than having others take care of me." Marcus considered this as they reached their car. "So the white belt is because you help kids like me learn how to be strong?" "Exactly," Rachel said. "And someday, when you're older, maybe you'll help other kids learn the same things." "I want to do that too," Marcus said with determination. "I want to be useful like you." Rachel realized that this conversation was worth more than any documentary or public recognition could ever provide. She was raising a son who understood that true strength served others, and she was part of a community that valued contribution over competition. What do you think of Rachel's decision? If you've ever known someone quietly strong like her, share their story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Heroine to help spread these stories of quiet strength. 1 year later, Rachel's Tuesday afternoon classes had grown from 3 neighborhood children to 15 regular students ranging in age from 6 to 12. The community center had offered her the use of their multi-purpose room, and what had started as informal backyard instruction had evolved into a structured program that parents throughout the area sought out for their children. Rachel still insisted on keeping the classes small and personal. She knew each child's name, their individual challenges, and their family circumstances. More importantly, she tailored her instruction to each child's personality and needs rather than following a rigid curriculum. Remember, Rachel told her students as they practiced basic forms, we're not trying to look scary or intimidating. We're trying to look calm and confident. There's a big difference. 8-year-old Maria raised her hand. Ms. Rachel, what if someone is bigger than me and I can't use the moves? The most important thing you're learning here isn't how to fight, Rachel replied. It's how to think clearly when you're scared or upset. If you can think clearly, you can usually find a solution that doesn't involve fighting at all. Kyle had become a regular volunteer assistant in Rachel's classes, bringing enthusiasm and technical knowledge while learning Rachel's approach to teaching children. He had modified his own teaching style with older students to emphasize the same principles Rachel demonstrated with the younger kids. I used to focus on making my students tough, Kyle told Rachel after one class. Now I focus on making them thoughtful. The results are so much better. The white belt Kyle had given Rachel hung on a hook by the community center's door, visible to every child who entered for class. Several parents had asked about its significance, and Rachel explained that it reminded her that every day brought opportunities to learn something new, regardless of how much you already knew. Marcus, now 8 years old and one of the more experienced students in the class, had become a natural teacher himself. He helped newer students with basic techniques and served as an example of how martial arts training could build confidence without creating arrogance. Mom, Marcus said as they walked home after class one evening, Tommy's dad asked if you were going to start charging money for the classes since so many kids want to join. Rachel had been thinking about this question herself. The community center had offered to pay her a modest fee for instruction, and several parents had asked about tuition. The additional income would certainly be helpful for their family budget. What do you think I should do? Rachel asked her son. Marcus considered the question seriously. I think if people can pay, they should. But if they can't pay, they should still get to learn. Like how you taught me first because I'm your son, but now you teach other kids too. That's very wise thinking, Rachel said. What made you think about it that way? You always say that sharing what you know makes you stronger, not weaker. So if more kids learn what we learn, everyone gets stronger together. Rachel realized that Marcus had absorbed the most important lesson she had tried to teach, that individual strength should serve collective well-being. That weekend, Rachel implemented a sliding scale fee structure that allowed families to pay what they could afford while ensuring that no child was excluded due to financial constraints. The community center agreed to supplement the program through their youth development budget. As Rachel watched her students practice their forms on Saturday morning, she reflected on the unexpected direction her life had taken. She had never planned to become a community martial arts instructor. She had simply responded to immediate needs as they arose. Her mother's illness, Marcus's needs, her neighbors' requests for help with their children. But each choice had led naturally to the next, creating a life that felt both purposeful and sustainable. She was using her skills in ways that strengthened her community while allowing her to remain the kind of mother and neighbor she wanted to be. The white belt by the door caught the morning sunlight, reminding Rachel that mastery wasn't about reaching a final destination. It was about remaining open to growth, service, and the unexpected opportunities that arose when you lived according to your values rather than other people's expectations. You don't need to prove anything at all. If you live authentically, people will naturally find their way to you. In the gentle rhythm of teaching children to move with confidence and purpose, Rachel had found her own perfect balance between strength and service, between personal fulfillment and community contribution. If you believe that humility can create the greatest strength of all, please subscribe to Hidden Heroine, where we celebrate women who are quiet but extraordinary.